crash on the deserted planet. The sky was full of fire. Sarah's ship shook violently as alarms screamed all around her. She grabbed the side of her seat and tried not to panic. Pieces of metal flew past the window. The stars outside turned. Red then black. "This is bad," she whispered. The ship broke in two. She felt the force pull her back, and then everything went dark. Sarah woke up lying on cold, hard ground. Her head hurt. The sky above was orange, not Earth's blue. Around her were broken pieces of metal and smoke rising in the air. Her ship had crashed. She sat up slowly. Her body ached all over. She looked around. No people, no voices, no trees, only sand, rocks, wind, and silence. She stood up and checked her pockets. She had a small water pack, a broken comm device, and a flare gun with one shot. Sarah's breathing was heavy. She was alone, on a strange planet, with no way to call for help. She took a step, and something sharp cut her boot. She looked down. Metal shard. Carefully, she started walking toward the highest rock hill she could see. Maybe from there she could see what was around her. The wind blew sand into her face. It felt dry and hot. Her lips cracked. Her stomach growled. After 1 hour of walking, she reached the hill and climbed slowly. At the top, she looked out. Still nothing. No cities. No green. No signs of life. She was truly alone. Or so she thought. Later that night, she found a small cave near the base of the hill. It was dark, but it offered shelter from the wind. She used a piece of her ship's panel as a door and placed it across the cave entrance. Then she lay on the ground and curled into a ball. Her body was shaking. From cold. From fear. She closed her eyes. Maybe if she slept, the pain would go away. But sleep didn't come. Not easily. Because she heard it. A sound. A soft, scratching noise. From inside the cave. Sarah sat up, her heart racing. "Is someone there?" She whispered. No answer. Just a slow, dragging sound. She picked up a sharp piece of metal and held it in her hand like a knife. "Show yourself." Then she saw something move. A shadow. Not large. About the size of a person. But not human. Its skin glowed faintly in the dark. Its body was thin and tall. It had no hair. Its eyes were large and glowing pale blue. It looked just as scared as she was. They both froze. The alien held its hands up, slowly, not to attack, but to show peace. Sarah didn't move. She didn't run. She was too tired, too shocked, too weak. The alien made a soft sound like a gentle hum. Then it pointed to its side. Blood. Its arm was injured, badly. It stumbled and fell to its knees. Sarah didn't know what to do, help it or run. But deep inside she knew, if she ran she'd still be alone. If she helped, maybe she wouldn't be. She sighed. Very slowly she walked over and knelt beside it. She looked at the wound. It was bleeding thick, dark fluid. Carefully she tore part of her sleeve and pressed it to the injury. The alien winced, but did not attack. She whispered, "You need help." It didn't understand. But it looked into her eyes and nodded once. Sarah sat beside it all night. She didn't sleep. Neither did the alien. They were both stuck. Both hurt, both alone. But now, not completely alone. As dawn came, the sun rose over the desert planet. Sarah looked at the broken land around her, then at the strange being resting beside her. A new thought entered her mind. If we want to survive, we'll have to trust each other. The creature in the mist. The second day began with silence, but not peace. Sarah opened her eyes to a sky covered in gray clouds. The planet's twin suns were hidden, and a strange white mist rolled over the sand like waves. Cold, thick, unnatural. She turned to the alien beside her. He was still breathing, but his wound had worsened. The cloth she had used was soaked in black-blue blood. His skin looked pale now, almost gray. "We need medicine," she whispered, even though he couldn't understand her words. But maybe he understood her tone. His glowing blue eyes opened slowly. He looked at her hand, then pointed weakly toward the horizon, not toward the crash, but in the other direction. "You know something," she said. "There's something that way?" The alien gave a short nod. Sarah stood gripping the piece of metal she'd used as a blade. She helped him to his feet. He was weak, but tall. He leaned on her shoulder. Step by step, they walked into the mist. The world around them changed quickly. The air grew colder. The sand beneath their feet turned dark, wet and sticky like old clay. The mist grew thicker until they couldn't see more than a few meters ahead. And then they heard it. A low growl. Not far. Sarah stopped. The alien froze beside her. The growl turned into a strange clicking sound like bones tapping on stone. Then, silence. Sarah's heart pounded. What was that? She didn't expect an answer, but the alien whispered one word, a word that sounded like fear. Varko. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt like death. They hurried forward, moving towards some strange, dark shapes ahead. Wreckage. An old ship. Not hers. Different. Rusted. Broken, but big enough to hide inside. They slipped in through a hole in the side and sat against the cold metal wall. The alien slid down to the floor, shaking with pain. Sarah looked around. Crates, wires, old tech, and something that looked like a first aid kit. She grabbed it. Inside were old alien tools and a thick tube of something like gel. She showed it to the alien. He gave a slow nod. Sarah opened the tube and gently pressed it against his wound. The alien clenched his teeth but didn't scream. The gel glowed as it touched the skin, then slowly turned dark and hardened like armor. It worked. He exhaled in relief. For the first time, he smiled at her. Sarah smiled back. That's when the sound returned. Not outside. Inside. Clicking. Crawling. Sarah stood up quickly and raised her blade. The alien struggled to sit up too. Something was in the ship with them. From the shadows came the shape of a creature, long, spider-like, but covered in bone plates. Its eyes glowed red, and long claws tapped on the metal floor. Sarah backed up, slowly. The creature hissed. The alien beside her reached into a box and grabbed a metal rod. He hit the side of the wall with it. Once, twice, 3 times. The creature turned its head sharply toward the sound. Then he threw the rod into the back of the ship. The creature chased after it. "Run!" Sarah shouted, grabbing his arm. They ran out of the wreckage and into the fog again. Their legs ached. The mist swallowed everything behind them, but they didn't stop until the sound was gone. Finally, they reached a large crater. Inside it, strange, glowing plants grew in patches. The alien dropped to his knees and began picking the plants with shaking hands. He offered one to Sarah. She sniffed it. It smelled like mint and salt. He ate one. She followed. Warmth spread through her chest. Energy. A little hope. Maybe this planet wasn't all death. Maybe it had secrets. Good ones too. That night, they returned to the cave. They were tired, but no longer weak, stronger. Together. Sarah lit a small fire. The alien sat beside her, holding his side. The gel was still working. She looked at him and asked softly, "What's your name?" He pointed to himself and said, "Kyle." She smiled. "Kyle, I'm Sarah." He repeated, "Sarah." It sounded strange from his mouth, but honest. Real. Then, from the mist outside the cave, the clicking sound came again. But this time Sarah didn't feel as afraid. She wasn't alone. She had Kale. And they had survived the creature in the mist. For now, he speaks my name. The days on the planet were long, but the nights were longer. Sarah sat near the fire inside the cave, hugging her knees. Outside, the mist had cleared, but cold winds still howled through the sharp rocks. Inside, the cave was quiet, almost peaceful. Kyle, the alien, was resting on a pile of cloth made from parts of the ship. His wound had healed a little, thanks to the glowing gel, but he was still weak, still quiet. Sarah had started talking more, even if he didn't fully understand. It helped her feel human again. "I miss real food," she said, poking at the dried root they found yesterday. "I'd do anything for a hot cup of coffee." Kyle watched her, blinking slowly. She smiled. "You don't know what coffee is, do you?" He tilted his head. She laughed softly. "Right. You probably drank space slime or whatever." She pointed to herself. "Sarah." She pointed to him. "Kyle." Then she pointed to the root. "Food." He copied her words slowly. "Food-y," she clapped. "Yes, food. Very good." Kyle looked proud. For a while, they practiced. Small words. Simple ones. Hot. Cold. Safe. Fire. Then she held her hand to her heart. "Friend." Kyle looked at her hand. He hesitated. Then slowly, he placed his hand on his own chest and said, "Friend." Her heart softened. It was the first time he had said something so clearly, with meaning. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the stars through a small crack in the cave wall. So many. So far. She wondered if anyone was looking for her, if Earth even knew she was alive. Would they come? Would they care? She heard Kale stir behind her. He sat up. Then, with a deep breath, he spoke. "Sa-ra." Sarah turned sharply. "What did you say?" Kale's voice was rough, but soft. "Sa-ra." Her name. He said her name. She blinked. "You remembered?" Kale nodded slowly. Then he touched her hand, lightly. "Sarah, friend." Her throat tightened. No human had spoken to her in days, but this alien, this stranger, had learned her name, had chosen to say it. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Thank you, Kale." He didn't understand the words, but he understood her face. The next day, the planet surprised them. A bright light shot across the sky, a burning trail like fire. Not a meteor, something else. Sarah stood up from the cave and ran to the top of the hill. Kyle followed her slowly. She looked into the sky and pointed. "Look!" Kyle squinted at the fire trail and then frowned. He said something in his language. Fast. Worried. Sarah didn't understand. "What is it?" Kyle pointed down toward the desert. Then he made a sharp motion with his hand, like something crashing. Sarah's eyes widened. "Another crash?" Kyle nodded. She didn't wait. She grabbed her pack and started walking. If it was a ship, maybe there was tech, maybe a comms system, maybe help. Kale limped behind her, still hurt but unwilling to let her go alone. After hours of walking, they reached it. Half buried in sand was a small alien pod, burned, twisted, broken, but not empty. Inside, Sarah saw something, someone, another, alien, but this one was not like Kale. It was armored, cold-eyed, dead, burned from the crash. Sarah stepped back. Kale stared at the body, face full of fear. "Enemy?" she asked. Kale nodded slowly. Then he pointed to a symbol on the pod. It matched, one tattooed on his arm but with a slash through it. "Your people?" Kale shook his head. Sarah understood. They were the ones who destroyed his world, who made him run. This enemy had found them, even here, even on a dead planet. They searched the wreck. Most was useless. But they found one thing glowing. A small disc humming softly. Kale picked it up and looked at Sarah. He said one word. Hope. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she believed him. That night back at the cave, Sarah wrote a message into her journal. I think I'm starting to care about him. He's not human, but he feels more human than most I've ever met. She closed the book. Kyle looked at her, and once more with meaning he whispered, Sarah. And she whispered back, Kyle. In that moment, under alien skies, it didn't matter that they were different. It only mattered that they were together. The storm shelter. The wind howled like a monster. Sarah covered her ears as the storm outside screamed across the land. Dust and sharp sand hit the cave wall like bullets. The suns were hidden and everything outside was dark brown and red. Kyle stood near the entrance, watching the storm with worry on his face. He held the glowing disc they found from the crashed enemy pod. It still hummed softly, but it wasn't strong enough to send a full signal. Sarah joined him, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. How long do these storms last? She asked. Kyle shook his head and made a wide circle motion with his hands. Long. Many sunrises. Sarah sighed. Great. They couldn't go anywhere. Not in that wind. The dust could slice their skin. It could bury them alive if they weren't careful. They needed shelter. Real shelter. Later that day, the cave grew colder. The fire struggled to stay lit. Kyle moved slowly, still weak from his old wound, but his eyes scanned the walls of the cave with purpose. Then he found something, an old metal hatch buried behind a pile of stone. He called Sarah over and pulled. At it together, they opened the rusted door. Beneath was a small tunnel leading down into darkness. A bunker? Sarah asked. Kyle nodded. Old, safe. She wasn't sure, but the storm was getting worse. They didn't have a choice. They crawled down into the tunnel. It was narrow, full of dust, but safe from the storm. At the bottom, it opened into a small underground room. It had old alien tech, broken screens and long-dead lights. Sarah found some cracked glass, likely once used for food or water. Kyle found a blanket rolled into a metal box. It smelled terrible, but they used it anyway. Then the door above slammed shut from the wind. They were trapped inside. Sarah sat against the wall, hugging her knees. Kyle sat beside her, his shoulders touching hers. The room was small. And now, there, was silence. No wind, no light. Just the soft sound of two people breathing. Sarah looked at Kyle. We might be stuck here for days. Kyle didn't reply. He just looked at her, his glowing eyes calm. She chuckled bitterly. Guess we should get comfortable. Kyle tilted his head. Comfort. Sarah smiled. Yeah, relax, safe. Not fight. Kyle nodded slowly. Comfort. With Sarah. Her smile softened. That's right. They sat in silence for a while. Then she pulled out her small journal. She drew a picture of Earth the way she remembered it. Trees, rivers, birds. Kyle watched closely. Then he took the pen and gently drew beside her picture. His planet. Twin moons. Spiky plants. A tall tower. A bright round star. His hand shook. He missed his world. She reached out and gently touched his fingers. We've both lost everything, she whispered. But maybe we still have something here. Kyle looked into her eyes. His breathing slowed. Then carefully he moved closer. Sarah's heart raced. Their faces were just inches apart. She didn't pull away. Time passed differently underground. They spoke soft words, practiced each other's languages, laughed at wrong ones, shared stories in gestures and expressions. Kyle showed her a game from his planet, drawing symbols in the dust and guessing the meaning. Sarah taught him how to hum a human lullaby. They forgot the storm. They forgot the fear. And in the quiet, in the dark, something changed. They no longer felt like strangers. That night, as they lay side by side under the old blanket, Kyle whispered something in his language. Sarah didn't understand it, but it sounded gentle, like a promise. She looked into his eyes and whispered back, "We'll survive this. Together." He reached out, touched her cheek softly, and closed his eyes. For the first time since the crash, she felt warm, safe, wanted. When the storm ended 3 days later, they climbed out into the sunlight. The planet looked different now, washed clean, quiet. They stood together, blinking into the light. But inside them, something had begun to grow. Not fear, not sadness, connection, strange signs in her body. Sarah felt different. At first, she thought it was just hunger. The food on the planet was strange. Bitter roots, dry leaves, glowing fruit. But this was something else. Her stomach felt tight in the mornings. Her skin was warm, even when the wind was cold. She became tired faster. And sometimes, when she stood up too quickly, the world spun around her. She didn't tell Kyle right away. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe she just missed home. But deep inside, a question had begun to grow. It had been many days since the storm. They had repaired part of the wreckage to make a better shelter above the cave. Kyle worked hard, but Sarah noticed he kept watching her more carefully now. When she tripped once, while climbing the hill, he rushed to help. His hand touched her back gently and his eyes searched her face. "Sarah, weak?" he asked. She forced a smile. "Just tired. It's fine." Kyle frowned. He didn't believe her, neither did she. That night she couldn't sleep. Her body felt strange. Her heartbeat was faster. And something deep inside her, something she couldn't explain, was changing. She placed a hand on her belly, then the memory came back. The bunker, the night of the storm, the quiet closeness, the warmth between them. Her eyes widened. "No," she whispered. It couldn't be. But what if it was? The next morning, Cale brought her a strange flower he had found. It smelled sweet and made her feel a little better. She thanked him, but he could see something was wrong. He handed her the scanner they took from the enemy pod. She had used it once before to check for life nearby. Now, she pointed it at herself. The screen flickered, then beeped. Twice. Sarah stared at the result. Her hands shook. Kyle leaned in to look. His mouth slowly opened in shock. He whispered a word in his language. "Child." Sarah nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. I think I'm pregnant." Silence. Kyle sat down, stunned. Sarah sat beside him, her mind spinning. How is this possible? We're not even from the same species. Kale looked down at his hands. Then, he placed one gently over hers. She didn't pull away. He looked into her eyes and said quietly, "Life finds way." His English was broken, but his meaning was clear. Sarah wiped her face. "What do we do now?" Kale pointed to her belly and smiled, softly, shyly. "Protect." She breathed in slowly. "Together?" He nodded. "Together." In the days that followed, everything felt different. Kale began collecting more food, building stronger walls, making the bed softer. He brought her warm stones to help her sleep and watched her closely with every step she took. Sarah started speaking to the child growing inside her. "Hi, little one," she whispered one morning. "You're not human, not alien. You're something new, something beautiful." Kale watched her, his eyes full of something deeper than she'd seen before. Something like love, but not everything was safe. One night, strange sounds returned. Footsteps, not creatures this time, but something worse. Machines, hunters, enemies. Kale grabbed his weapon. Sarah hid behind the wall, holding her belly. They weren't alone anymore. Someone or something had picked up the same signal from the pod. They were being tracked. Kale placed his hand on Sarah's and whispered, "We fight. We protect." Sarah looked at him. Her heart was afraid but strong. "Yes," she said, "for the baby, for us." As the footsteps came closer through the night, Sarah stood beside Cale, not as a human lost on a dead planet, but as a mother, as a warrior. The signal tower. The enemies came at dawn. Their shadows stretched across the desert, tall and sharp. Metal boots crushed the sand. Their armor was black, with glowing red eyes, and their weapons hummed like dying stars. Sarah held her breath behind the rocks. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. One hand pressed over her stomach, the other clenched a sharp metal rod. Cale crouched beside her, calm but alert. He whispered, "Hunters, trackers, war leftovers." Sarah whispered back, "Are they looking for the pod?" Cale nodded. "And now, they look for us." They didn't have time. The bunker wasn't safe anymore. The cave would be found. And Sarah, she couldn't run forever. Not now. Not with the life growing inside her. They needed help, real help. Kyle remembered something, an old signal tower in the north, hidden in the cliffs, used long ago by his people before the war. "If we reach it," he said, "we call Sky people. Maybe rescue." Sarah looked at her belly, then at Cale's tired eyes. "We go." The journey was long. Hot days, cold nights. The planet's cruel winds returned with every sunset. Sarah stumbled often, and Kyle always caught her. He gave her water from strange plants, wrapped her in heatstone blankets, and carried her when her legs gave out. They moved through valleys of bone and metal, the remains of battles long forgotten, skeletons of machines, rusted tanks, broken helmets. Cale said nothing about them, but his face turned dark every time they passed one. He had lost everything once. He wouldn't lose her now. On the fourth day, they reached the cliffs. High stone walls stood before them, cracked and sharp. At the very top was a small black tower half buried in dust. Sarah looked up, exhausted. "That's it?" Cale nodded. "Can we climb it?" He looked at the steep rocks. Then he looked at her belly. No. She already knew the answer, so he turned to her, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and said, "You, wait. I climb." Sarah's eyes filled with worry. "It's too high." Cale's voice was calm. "Child needs call. We need Sky." Before she could stop him, he began to climb. The rocks cut into his hands. Sand fell with every step. But Kyle didn't stop. Sarah watched from below, hands over her mouth, praying he wouldn't fall. Halfway up, a rock broke. He slipped, but caught himself. He looked down at her and smiled weakly. She didn't smile back. Not until he reached the top. Inside the tower, Cale found a round console covered in dust and vines. He brushed it clean, placed the glowing disc from the enemy pod into the center, and powered it up. The lights flickered, the screen glowed, and a quiet hum filled the air. Cale pressed his hand to the panel and spoke his language softly, words full of hope and pain. Then, the signal shot into the sky. A beam of blue light tore through the clouds straight into space. Sarah gasped below. He did it. He called for help, but the hunters had followed them. Sarah heard the engines first, 3 bikes flying low through the sand. Her heart dropped. They were coming fast. Cale saw them from above. He shouted her name. "Sarah! Run!" But she didn't run. She stood. Protecting her stomach with one arm, she picked up a rock and threw it toward the first rider. It hit the engine. Sparks flew. The bike spun out. Cale was already climbing down, fast, desperate. The second hunter aimed a gun at Sarah, but before he fired, Cale landed hard on him from above, knocking the weapon away. They fought like beasts in the dirt. Sarah grabbed the broken gun from the ground and aimed at the last hunter. Her hands shook. Her breath was fast. The hunter raised his blade. She screamed and fired. The shot hit his leg. He fell. Silence returned. Cale stood up, breathing hard, bruised but alive. Sarah ran to him. He held her close. She sobbed into his chest. We did it, she whispered. You did it. He kissed her forehead. You. Strong. They looked up together. The signal still burned in the sky. Help was coming, and this time, they wouldn't be alone. A new family under alien skies. The sky cracked open. A ship, sleek, silver, and silent, descended through the clouds. Its engines glowed with blue fire as it hovered above the desert floor, dust flying in every direction. Sarah covered her eyes. Her heart beat faster. They came, she whispered. They actually came. Cale stood beside her, one arm wrapped gently around her shoulders, the other resting over her stomach. The signal had worked. But Sarah didn't smile yet. She was scared. The rescue team stepped out of the ship in full suits, their faces behind clear visors. They looked human, maybe from Earth, or from one of the far colonies. One woman stepped forward, scanning the area. When her eyes met Sarah's, she paused. Sarah raised a hand slowly. I'm human. I'm from the Sol transport ship, ST-22. The woman blinked. That ship went missing 6 months ago. Sarah nodded. It crashed. I survived. But I wasn't alone. She stepped aside. Kyle stood tall beside her, silent but calm. The rescue team froze. Guns moved. One man whispered, "Alien." Sarah stood between them. "Don't. He saved my life." Over and over again. She hesitated, then added, "He's the father of my child." The team went quiet. Inside the ship, Sarah sat on a clean medical bed for the first time in weeks. Warm, light, soft air, real food. Cale sat across from her, a blanket over his shoulders. A medic cleaned the cuts on his arms without fear now. Another medic ran a scanner over Sarah's stomach and smiled. "It's real," the woman said. "Heartbeat strong, growth stable." Sarah closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you." Cale looked confused. Sarah leaned toward him and whispered, "Our child is healthy." He touched her hand, eyes wide, soft with wonder. He had lost his people. Now he had a family. But the commander wasn't happy. "This is complicated," she said, arms crossed. "You're asking us to bring an alien, an unknown species back, to human territory." Sarah stood her ground. "I'm not asking, I'm telling you he comes with me." "What if people don't accept him?" "Then they don't accept me." The commander looked at her belly. "You'll face questions. Anger, fear." Sarah nodded. "I'll face it. With him." Kyle didn't understand the words, but he understood her voice, her strength. He stepped beside her, eyes calm, proud. The commander stared at them for a long time, then gave a single nod. "All right. You both come home." As the ship rose into the sky, Sarah looked out the window. The planet below was fading, empty, broken, and silent. But it had given her something no world ever had: hope, a second chance, a family. She turned to Kyle, took his hand, and placed it over her heart. No more hiding, no more fear. Just us. Kyle smiled gently, then said the word that still sounded strange from alien lips, yet full of meaning. Home. Weeks later, on a quiet human colony far from Earth, Sarah walked through a garden of silver trees. Cale walked beside her wearing simple clothes and watching birds with curiosity. Their child was still growing inside her. But now, they had food, shelter, peace. People stared. Some whispered, but no one stopped them. Because she stood tall and... Kyle held her hand without shame. They were not just human or alien. They were something new, something born not from war, but from love.